I'm Rebecca, 28 female. I live in a city that never sleeps, in an apartment that's my quiet sanctuary from the noise. As a financial analyst, my life is governed by numbers, patterns, and the calm logic of spreadsheets, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos that was about to erupt. This is the story of how my 20-year friendship ended in a storm of false accusations at a wedding, and how a single text message gave me the power to ensure the truth came with a price tag. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our friendship was the kind people write books about, or so I thought. Sophia and I met when we were 8 years old, two gap-toothed kids who bonded over a shared love for a particular brand of glittery gel pens. We were inseparable through scraped knees, high school crushes, college all-nighters, and the daunting first steps into our adult lives. Our lives were intertwined like the threads of a complex tapestry. When she cried, I felt the sting in my own eyes. When I succeeded, she was the first to pop the champagne. We had a pact. No matter what, it was always us against the world. As we navigated our 20s, our paths, while still parallel, began to diverge in their details. I found comfort and stability in the world of finance. My days were spent analyzing market trends and advising clients on their portfolios. I loved the certainty of it, the way a well-balanced ledger brought a sense of order to the world. Sophia, on the other hand, thrived in a world of aesthetics and subjectivity. As an art gallery curator, she had an impeccable eye for talent and a flair for hosting events that were the talk of the town. Her life was a canvas of gallery openings, artist meet and greets, and champagne toasts. I was the practical one, she was the visionary. I managed the budgets for our girls' trips, she picked the destinations. It worked. When she met Julian, I was cautiously optimistic. He was a luxury real estate developer, a man who moved with an almost cinematic confidence. He was handsome, charming, and showered Sophia with the kind of grand romantic gestures she'd always dreamed of. He'd rent out entire restaurants for a dinner date or surprise her with weekend trips to Paris. On the surface, he was perfect. But my professional instincts, the ones that helped me spot a bad investment from a mile away, always felt a faint hum of unease around him. It wasn't anything I could pinpoint, just a feeling. His stories were a little too polished, his successes a little too vague on the details. He spoke of multi-million-dollar deals, but his wallet always seemed to be in his other jacket when the bill came. Still, Sophia was ecstatically happy. She was in love, and her happiness was my priority. So I pushed my reservations aside and embraced him as a friend. Given my profession, it wasn't long before Julian started asking for my friendly advice on his finances. "Becca, you're a genius with this stuff," he'd say, flashing a disarming smile. "My own finances are a mess of different accounts. I need to get organized, especially now that Sophia and I are building a future." Sophia encouraged it. "Please help him, Beck. You know how much this would mean to me. I want us to start our marriage on solid financial footing." How could I say no? Over several weekends, I sat with Julian, helping him consolidate his scattered accounts, create a budget, and set up a new primary account that would serve as the main hub for his business inflows, and eventually their shared marital expenses. He was building his brand, he said, and needed a streamlined way for investors to deposit funds. The bank required a multi-factor authentication setup, including a memorable password that was easy for him to recall but hard for others to guess. "What's something you'll never forget?" I asked him one afternoon as we finalized the online banking setup. He laughed. "Honestly, with all the numbers I'm juggling, I'm liable to forget my own birthday." He looked over at Sophia, who was bringing us coffee. "But I'll never forget yours, Becca. You're the one constant in Soph's life and now mine." He suggested it himself, a gesture that at the time felt incredibly touching. "Let's make it your birthday, the day our favorite financial guru was born." Sophia had beamed, calling it the perfect tribute to our friendship. And so, the password to Julian's financial future, the account meant to hold all their wedding money and his supposed business capital, was set to my date of birth. It felt like the ultimate symbol of trust, cementing my place as an indispensable part of their new life together. I felt honored. I felt valued. I felt like a fool. The wedding planning was a whirlwind. As maid of honor, I was Sophia's right hand. From dress fittings to venue. E-selection, I was there. I tasted cakes until I was sick of sugar, negotiated with vendors, and spent hours addressing invitations until my hand cramped. I threw her a bridal shower that was featured on a popular lifestyle blog, an event that perfectly blended my organizational skills with her artistic taste. I did it all with a smile, because my best friend was getting her fairy tale. The unease about Julian still lingered in the back of my mind, a quiet whisper I refused to acknowledge. Every time he made a grand, expensive gesture, I couldn't help but wonder which account the money was really coming from, but I'd shake the thought away. This was Sophia's happiness. That's all that mattered. The week before the wedding, as I helped her pack for her honeymoon, she grabbed my hands, her eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Rebecca," she said. "You're more than my best friend. You're my sister." The sincerity in her voice silenced any remaining doubt. We hugged tightly, two friends on the precipice of a new chapter, completely unaware that our book was about to be slammed shut. The day of the wedding arrived, painted in hues of ivory and blush. The venue was a magnificent old estate with sprawling gardens and a ballroom that looked like it had been plucked from a storybook. As maid of honor, my morning was a frantic but happy blur of activity. I helped Sophia into her breathtaking gown, a cascade of lace and silk that made her look ethereal. I steamed the bridesmaids' dresses, coordinated with the photographer, and made sure the groomsmen had their boutonnieres pinned on correctly. I was the calm in the center of the storm, the reliable bedrock on which Sophia's perfect day was built. Standing beside her as her father walked her down the aisle, my heart swelled with pride. She was radiant, a picture of pure joy. Julian stood at the altar, looking dapper in his custom tuxedo, his eyes fixed on his bride. In that moment, watching them, I allowed myself to believe. I let go of the last vestiges of my skepticism and embraced the fairy tale. Maybe this was real. Maybe they were the exception. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with heartfelt vows and happy tears. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the entire room erupted in applause. I stood beside them on the receiving line, greeting guests and smiling until my cheeks ached. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The shift began subtly during the cocktail hour. I noticed Sophia's mother, a woman who had always treated me like a second daughter, giving me a cool, appraising look. A few of her cousins, whom I'd known for years, whispered amongst themselves as I walked by, their conversation stopping abruptly. I brushed it off as wedding day stress. People get weird at weddings. But the feeling of being watched intensified. During the reception, as I was making my rounds to ensure the catering was running smoothly, I overheard a snippet of conversation from one of the bridesmaids. "Can't believe it. Right in front of everyone. So disrespectful to Sophia." I turned, but they quickly dispersed. A cold knot began to form in the pit of my stomach. What were they talking about? The final blow came just before my maid of honor speech. I was standing near the head table, reviewing my notes one last time, when Sophia's older sister, Amelia, approached me. Her expression was like granite. "Sophia needs to see you," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "In the bridal suite. Now." The urgency in her tone was alarming. I immediately thought something was wrong. "Is she okay? Did something happen?" "Just go," Amelia snapped, pointing towards the stairs. I hurried to the bridal suite, my mind racing. I found Sophia inside, but she wasn't alone. Her mother and Amelia stood on either side of her like sentinels. Sophia was sitting on a velvet chaise lounge, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. The joy from the ceremony had vanished, replaced by a mask of cold fury. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. "Soph, are you all right?" She didn't answer. She just stared at me, a look of profound betrayal in her eyes. It was her mother who spoke first. "We know what you've been doing, Rebecca." I was completely bewildered. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. What are you talking about?" "Don't play innocent." Sophia finally said, her voice trembling with rage. I can't believe I was so blind. I can't believe I trusted you. Trusted me? Sophia, you're not making any sense. What did I do? She stood up, her beautiful gown rustling with her agitated movements. You've been in love with him this whole time, haven't you? The accusation hung in the air, so absurd, so utterly baseless that I almost laughed. But the looks on their faces were deadly serious. What? Julian? Are you serious? Sophia, he's my friend's husband. He's like a brother to me. A brother, she scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Dawn. Lie to me, Rebecca. People have been telling me for months how you look at him, the way you hang on his every word. The private meetings to discuss his finances. How convenient. My mind reeled. The friendly advice, the weekends spent helping them, all of it was now being twisted into something ugly and unrecognizable. That's insane. You were there for most of those meetings. You asked me to help him. I saw the way you looked at him at the altar today, she continued, her voice rising. Like you were the one marrying him. My own cousin saw you touching his arm during the cocktail hour, flirting with him on my wedding day. The touching his arm was me handing him a glass of water. The look at the altar was me crying happy tears for my best friend. Every innocent gesture, every act of friendship had been meticulously reframed into a narrative of betrayal. Julian must have been planting these seeds for months, cultivating Sophia's insecurities, turning her own family against me. I looked at her, my best friend of 20 years, and I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. Sophia, please, I pleaded, my voice breaking. This isn't you. Someone is poisoning you against me. Julian. Don't you dare say his name, she shrieked. He told me you might try this, that you might try to blame him to save yourself. He said you confessed your feelings to him last week and he turned you down. The lie was so audacious, so diabolically brilliant that it stole the air from my lungs. He had preemptively discredited me. He had built a fortress of lies around Sophia, and I was on the outside with no way in. There was no reasoning with her. The verdict had already been delivered. I want you to leave, she said, her voice dropping to a chillingly quiet tone. I want you out of my wedding, out of my life. Sophia. Get out, she screamed, pointing at the door. My husband doesn't want you here, my family doesn't want you here, and I never want to see you again. Her mother and sister moved towards me, their faces hard and unforgiving. There was no point in fighting. I was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Wordlessly, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving my Maid of Honor bouquet on a table by the door. As I descended the grand staircase, I could feel the eyes of the guests on me. The whispers followed me like a plague. I walked past the ballroom, where the band was starting to play a cheerful song, a grotesque soundtrack to the worst moment of my life. I didn't stop until I reached the parking lot, the gravel crunching under my heels. My life's most important friendship had just been executed, and I was the only one in mourning. The car was an oven. I had left it sitting in the afternoon sun, and now the leather seats scalded my skin through the thin fabric of my bridesmaid dress. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the keys, the engine finally roaring to life and blasting hot air from the vents. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, the horn letting out a pathetic, muffled bleat. Sobs racked my body, harsh and ragged. It felt like my entire world had been hollowed out. 20 years. A friendship that had been the central pillar of my identity was gone, demolished in a matter of minutes by a cascade of calculated lies. My mind was a chaotic storm of images and words. Sophia's face, contorted with a rage I'd never seen before, her mother's icy glare, the whispers of the wedding guests, and Julian's smug, charming face, now exposed in my mind as the mask of a master manipulator. He had done this. He had systematically dismantled my relationship with Sophia, isolating her from the one person who might have seen him for what he truly was. Why? The question hammered at my skull. Was it just a power trip, or something more? I cried until I had no tears left, leaving me in a state of hollowed-out exhaustion. The blush-pink bridesmaid dress felt like a costume from a horror movie. I wanted to rip it off. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just sat there numb as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of the estate. The sounds of laughter and music drifted from the ballroom, a cruel reminder of the celebration I was no longer a part of. My phone had been buzzing intermittently in my clutch bag, but I had ignored it, assuming it was confused friends wondering where the maid of honor had gone. Finally, driven by a flicker of morbid curiosity, I picked it up. The screen was lit up with notifications. There were a few missed calls from Chloe, my friend and colleague, probably wondering how the wedding was going. There were a dozen texts in a group chat with the other bridesmaids, a flurry of question marks and gossip. And then I saw it. A series of texts from a number I knew all too well, Julian. My first instinct was to block the number, to erase him from my life as completely as they had just erased me. But something made me pause. The messages were frantic, a stark contrast to his usual cool and collected demeanor. The first text, sent about 20 minutes ago, was surprisingly casual. Julian, hey Rebecca, hope you're okay. Things got a little crazy in there. A wave of fury washed over me. A little crazy? He acted as if I had just spilled a drink on someone, not been brutally excommunicated from my own life based on his lies. I was about to throw the phone onto the passenger seat when the next text came through. Julian, look, I know things are bad with you and Soph right now, but I'm in a real jam. A jam? He thought he could destroy my life and then ask me for a favor. The audacity was breathtaking. Then came the third text, and the fourth, in rapid succession. Julian, the deposit for the honeymoon suite didn't go through. The card was declined. Julian, I need to transfer money from the main account ASAP. They're threatening to give our suite away. My eyes narrowed. The main account. The one I had helped him set up. The one that held all the monetary gifts from the wedding, plus the significant sum his investor had supposedly wired in for his latest real estate project. The account whose security he had entrusted to me. I watched, mesmerized, as the three dots appeared and disappeared. He was typing again. The final message appeared, and it was the one that changed everything. Julian, I can't remember the password. I know it's your birthday, but my head's a mess. Is it MMDDYY or DDMMYY or with the year first? I keep getting locked out. Please, Rebecca, I need it now. I read the text once, then twice. The letters and numbers seemed to glow on the screen. The password, my birthday, the 6-digit key he so desperately needed, was a simple sequence of numbers that were as familiar to me as my own name. A date he had chosen himself in a cloying, saccharine gesture of trust and friendship. The ultimate irony. He had systematically removed the one person who held the key to his financial kingdom. A strange sense of calm washed over me, displacing the grief and rage. It was like watching the tumblers of a lock fall into place. The pieces of the puzzle, the vague feelings of unease I'd had about him, his financial secrecy, his need to control Sophia, all started to click together. This wasn't just about a power trip or jealousy. This was about money. He needed access to that account, and he needed it desperately. He had isolated Sophia from me to ensure no one was scrutinizing his finances. He just never imagined he'd be locked out of the vault himself. I sat back in my seat, the hot leather no longer bothering me. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My makeup was a mess, my eyes were swollen, but for the first time all day, they were clear. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. He had kicked me out of their lives, but he had left the door to their bank account wide open for me to slam shut. The frantic, pleading text message glowed on my phone screen. He needed the password. Their honeymoon, their financial future, all of it was hanging in the balance, waiting for 6 simple digits. My birthday, a day that was supposed to represent my bond with them, now represented the firewall standing between a con man and his prize. I took a deep breath. The sobs had stopped. The plan had not yet formed, but the seed of it was planted. I did not text back. I simply turned the phone over, placed it on the passenger seat, put the car in drive, and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the sound of their party and my old life behind me. The drive back to my apartment was on autopilot. The city lights blurred into long, hypnotic streaks, but I wasn't seeing them. My mind was a flurry of activity, replaying every interaction I'd ever had with Julian, but now under a new, harsh light. Each memory was being re-examined, recatalogued from charming gesture to potential red flag. The time he forgot his wallet at a five-star restaurant, leaving me to cover a massive bill he promised to pay back immediately. He never did. The way he'd casually ask about the market, probing for information about high-yield, short-term investments, but would grow vague when I asked about his own capital. The expensive gifts he bought Sophia, were they really gestures of love, or were they investments in his future, purchased with her own money or funds from her family? When I got home, I didn't bother changing out of the ridiculous pink dress. I walked straight to my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard. My grief had crystallized into a single, sharp purpose. I needed to know the truth. I trusted my professional intuition, but I needed facts. I needed data. My first call was to Chloe. She picked up on the second ring. "Becca, oh my God, what happened? The bridesmaids chat is going insane. They said Sophia's sister escorted you out. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Chloe, I need a favor." "ND, it has to stay between us." "Anything, name it." "You know that research software we use at work? The one that can dig through public records, business filings, and legal databases?" "Of course," she said, her tone shifting from concerned friend to professional ally. "What are you looking for?" "A ghost," I replied. "I need you to run a full background check on a man named Julian Croft. Specifically, look for any bankruptcies, liens, lawsuits, or failed businesses. Check for any assets registered in his name. I have a feeling his luxury real estate development empire is built on a foundation of hot air." "Consider it done," Chloe said, no further questions asked. She was a data scientist. She understood the power of finding a pattern in the noise. "I'll have something for you by morning." With Chloe on the case, I turned my attention to the financial front. I couldn't ethically, or legally, access the bank account I had helped Julian set up. But I didn't need to. I had helped him choose the bank. I knew their security protocols. 3 failed password attempts would trigger a temporary lockout. 5 would freeze the account pending a direct call or in-person visit from the primary account holder. I imagined Julian, sweating in his tuxedo, frantically typing different combinations of my birthday into his phone. MMDDYYYY, DDMMYY, YYYYMMDD. I smiled grimly. He would have triggered the freeze within minutes. My next step was more analog. I thought back to every conversation, every detail Julian had ever let slip. He once mentioned a mentor from his early days, a man named Arthur Vance, who had supposedly given him his start in real estate. It was a name dropped to add legitimacy to his backstory. A quick search on a professional networking site brought up a profile for an Arthur Vance, a semi-retired, legitimate property mogul in a neighboring state. On a hunch, I crafted a careful email. I introduced myself as a financial analyst performing due diligence for a potential investor who had been impressed by Julian's work and had cited Arthur as a key influence. It was a long shot, but desperate people often leave a trail. As I worked, my phone continued to buzz. The texts from Julian had escalated from frantic to borderline abusive, a string of angry demands and threats. "Julian, Rebecca, this isn't funny. Answer your phone." "Julian, I'm not kidding. I'll tell Sophia you drained the account yourself." "Julian, you will regret this. I swear to God." The threats were empty. He couldn't accuse me of draining an account he couldn't access himself. It was the desperate flailing of a man watching his plan crumble. Mixed in with his texts were pleading messages from Sophia. "Sophia, Beck, please. I don't know what's going on, but Julian is freaking out. Just give him the password and we can talk about this later." "Sophia, you're ruining my wedding night. Is that what you want, to make me miserable?" The manipulation in her texts was a hollow echo of Julian's. The use of we, the centering of her own feelings, the complete lack of apology or even questioning of the narrative she had so readily accepted. It hurt, but it also solidified my resolve. This wasn't the Sophia I knew. This was someone lost in the fog of a con artist spell. The next morning, the pieces began to fall into place with chilling speed. Chloe sent me a secured file. The contents were exactly what I had suspected, only worse. Julian Croft had a string of failed LLCs trailing behind him like wreckage. He had been sued twice by former business partners for fraud. He had declared bankruptcy 3 years ago, a fact he had conveniently omitted. There were no significant assets in his name. The flashy car he drove was a long-term lease, and the address for his development company was a P.O. box. He wasn't a luxury real estate developer. He was a predator who preyed on trusting people, and Sophia was his latest, most lucrative target. Then an email notification popped up. It was from Arthur Vance. His reply was short and pointed. Ms. Evans, I am not familiar with a Julian Croft. I have never mentored anyone by that name. However, the name does sound vaguely familiar. I believe he was an intern at my firm for about 3 weeks nearly a decade ago. He was terminated for misrepresenting company interests and falsifying expense reports. I would advise your investor to proceed with extreme caution. There it was, the final nail in the coffin of his fabricated life. I laid all the evidence out on my coffee table, the bankruptcy filings, the lawsuits, the email from his mentor. It painted a damning portrait of a serial grifter. The investor, who had supposedly put a large sum into their shared account, was likely a fiction, a story to explain the influx of cash from wedding gifts. Julian's plan was simple and horrifying. Marry Sophia, consolidate all her family money and wedding gifts into an account only he could control, and then, presumably, vanish, leaving her with nothing but a broken heart and an empty bank account. But he had made one critical error. He had underestimated the maid of honor he had so carelessly discarded. He had based the security of his entire scheme on the birthday of the one person who had the skills and the motivation to expose him. My phone buzzed again. It was a new text from Julian. The tone shifted from rage to pathetic begging. Julian, okay, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said those things. Please, Rebecca, I'm begging you. The hotel is about to kick us out. Sophia is crying. Just give me the password. I looked at the message, then at the evidence spread before me. The time for grief was over. The time for justice was beginning. The following 24 hours were a masterclass in calculated silence. I did not respond to Julian's frantic texts, nor to Sophia's increasingly desperate pleas. I let them stew in the 5-star panic room they had created for themselves. Every unanswered call, every unread message was a small, sharp twist of the knife. They had kicked me out of their world, so I was giving them exactly what they wanted: my complete and total absence. My apartment, once a sanctuary of peace, had become a war room. With the evidence Chloe and I had compiled, the full picture of Julian's scheme was sickeningly clear. The large deposit into the shared account wasn't from a mythical investor. It was from Sophia's parents, a generous wedding gift of $100,000 meant to help them buy their first home. Julian had insisted the wire transfer go into the new account he'd set up, spinning a story about better interest rates and fluid access for real estate down payments. He had charmed them just as he had charmed Sophia, convincing them that this was the most responsible way to handle such a large sum. He was planning to steal their life savings. The weight of this knowledge was immense. My initial anger began to morph into a heavier, more complex emotion. This was no longer just about my wounded pride or the loss of a friendship. It was about protecting Sophia, even if she didn't want my protection. It was about preventing a predator from succeeding. My revenge couldn't just be about denying him the password. That would be petty and temporary. He would eventually get access by going to the bank. No, the plan had to be bigger. It had to be surgical. It had to dismantle his entire charade in a way that he could never recover from. My first move was to draft 2 separate, meticulously organized emails. The first email was addressed to Sophia's parents. I attached every piece of evidence: Julian's bankruptcy records, the details of the lawsuits from his former partners, the screenshot of the email from Arthur Vance disavowing him, and a summary of his non-existent real estate empire. I wrote the email not as an angry, jilted friend, but as the financial analyst they had always known me to be. The subject line was simple, urgent, due diligence regarding Julian Croft. The body of the email was calm, factual, and devastating. I laid out the information without emotion. I explained that I had uncovered this information after some red flags had been raised, and that I felt a moral and professional obligation to share it with them, given their significant financial contribution. I ended it with a simple, powerful statement. I believe Julian's intentions are fraudulent. The bank account you wired your gift into is the intended vehicle for this fraud. I urge you to contact your bank immediately to report a suspected fraudulent transfer. As the transfer was recent, you may be able to recall the funds. The second email was for Sophia. It was the harder of the two to write. I deleted draft after draft, struggling to find the right tone. An angry tirade would be dismissed. A pleading message would be seen as weak. In the end, I opted for cold, hard truth. The subject line, the password. I didn't waste time with salutations. The email contained only two things. First, a single, centered line of text. The price of the password is the truth. Second, below that line, I attached the exact same file of evidence I had sent to her parents. No explanation. No, I told you so. No emotional appeal. Just the raw, undeniable data of her husband's deceit. I was giving her the choice. Stay in the dark with her charming husband, or open the attachment and face the reality of the man she had married. Before I hit send on either email, I made one final preparation. I called the fraud department of the bank, my bank, where I was a known client. I didn't mention Julian's account specifically, as that would be a breach of privacy. Instead, I reported that my personal information, my date of birth, had been used without my consent as a security password on an account I had recently learned might be involved in fraudulent activity. I explained the situation with the wedding and the owner's frantic attempts to get the password from me. The agent was incredibly helpful. While she couldn't give me details about Julian's account, she assured me that my report would be officially logged. A fraud alert would be placed, adding another layer of security and scrutiny. Any attempt by Julian to access the funds would now be met with a series of deeply uncomfortable questions. With everything in place, I took a deep breath and hit send on both emails, one after the other. The digital files flew through cyberspace, silent harbingers of the chaos to come. I imagined the notifications appearing on their phones, Sophia and Julian, likely in some generic hotel room by now, having been kicked out of their honeymoon suite. I imagined her parents, perhaps enjoying a quiet morning coffee after the whirlwind wedding, seeing my name pop up in their inbox. The cost of trust, I thought, wasn't just about money. It was about the shattering of illusions. Julian had counted on Sophia's blind trust. Sophia had broken my trust. Now it was time for them to pay the price, not in dollars and cents, but in the cold, hard currency of reality. I turned off my phone, made myself a cup of tea, and for the first time in 2 days, I sat down and truly relaxed. The plan was in motion. The ball was no longer in my court. The fallout was faster and more explosive than I could have ever imagined. I had intended to keep my phone off for at least a day, to give the information time to settle and the consequences time to unfold. But a few hours later, an insistent knocking on my apartment door broke the silence. I peered through the peephole and was surprised to see Chloe. I opened the door and she held up her phone, her eyes wide. "You are not going to believe this," she said, stepping inside. She showed me her screen. It was a social media page, but not Sophia's curated, aesthetic feed. It was a local gossip forum, and the top post was already buzzing with comments. Someone who worked at the five-star hotel had anonymously posted the entire story. A newlywed couple, the Crofts, had been escorted out of their honeymoon suite by security in the middle of the night after the groom's card was declined multiple times, and he caused a scene in the lobby, screaming at his bride and frantically trying to make calls. The post described Julian as unhinged and Sophia as a sobbing mess in a wedding dress. Paradise had been lost before it was even found. "That's just the appetizer," Chloe said, scrolling to another page. This time, it was a message from a mutual friend who was a junior associate at the law firm Sophia's father used. The message was brief. Mr. L, Sophia's father, just came in like a tornado. Heard him yelling on the phone about recalling a wire transfer. Something about total fraud. Hope everything's okay. The first email had hit its target. Sophia's father, a pragmatic and decisive man, had not hesitated. He had seen the evidence and acted instantly to protect his money. That $100,000 was no longer in Julian's reach. It was likely already being clawed back by the bank's fraud department. The rest of the day was a cascade of second-hand information. The bridesmaids' group chat, which I was still silently observing, had devolved into chaos. One of them had received a garbled, crying voicemail from Sophia. She was at her parents' house. Her father had apparently shown her my email. Julian was not with her. He had reportedly lost his mind when he found out the money was gone, blaming Sophia, blaming me, blaming her parents before storming out. The real confrontation, however, came that evening. My phone, which I had finally turned back on, rang with an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered and put it on speaker. "Rebecca," the voice was hoarse-broken, it was Sophia. I didn't say anything, I just waited. "I'm at my parents' house," she said, her words punctuated by sniffles. "I saw your email, I saw all of it." "Okay," I said, my voice neutral. It was the only word I could offer. "He lied," she whispered, as if saying it aloud for the first time. "He lied about everything. The money, his business. He admitted it. When my dad called and said the wire was being recalled, he just snapped. The person I saw, it wasn't the man I married." I remained silent, letting her words hang in the empty space between us. There was no "I'm sorry." No apology for the accusations, for the humiliation, for destroying our friendship in front of hundreds of people. It was all about her and her pain. "The password," she said, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "I still need it, Rebecca. There's still the wedding gift money in there. Thousands of dollars from our friends and family. It's all tied up in that account. I need to get it back, to return it to people. Please." So that's what this was. Not a call for reconciliation, but another transaction. She needed something from me. I thought about the pain of the last few days. I thought about her standing by as her moth. R and sister treated me like a criminal. I thought about her screaming, "Get out," at me. "No," I said, the word clear and firm. A shocked silence on the other end. What? What do you mean no? It's my money. It's our guests' money." "The account is in Julian's name, Sophia," I stated calmly, channeling my inner financial analyst. "Legally, it's his money. And that account is currently under a fraud alert that I personally helped place on it. The only way to access those funds now is for the primary account holder, Julian, to present himself at a physical bank branch with 2 forms of government-issued ID and answer a series of very detailed security questions about his financial history. A history that, as we now both know, is entirely fabricated." The implications of my words slowly dawned on her. Julian would never go to the bank. To do so would be to walk into a trap, to face questions he couldn't answer and expose himself completely. The money was effectively frozen, locked in a digital purgatory. "But how do I get it back?" she stammered. "That sounds like a question for your lawyer," I said coolly. "You'll likely have to pursue a legal judgment against your husband. It will be a long and complicated process. I wish you the best of luck with it." "Rebecca, please don't do this to me," she begged, the tears flowing freely now. "After everything we've been through." "Everything we've been through?" I finally allowed a sliver of my own hurt to enter my voice. "The only thing we've been through in the last 48 hours is you, baselessly and cruelly, accusing me of being in love with your fiancé and having me thrown out of your wedding. You didn't ask for my side. You didn't even pause. You just believed him. You chose him. So now you can deal with the consequences of that choice. Together." I didn't wait for a reply. I ended the call, my hand steady. It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do, but it was also the most liberating. I had not only protected her family's savings, but I had also forced her to confront the true cost of her blind trust and her swift betrayal. The wedding gifts were collateral damage in a war Julian had started and that she had willingly co-signed. Paradise was not only lost, it had been foreclosed on. In the weeks that followed, the story of Sophia and Julian's disastrous 12-hour marriage became something of a legend in our social circle. The narrative I had carefully constructed through facts and evidence had taken root, and the truth, for once, had drowned out the lies. People who had given me side-eye at the wedding were now sending me apologetic texts. The bridesmaids who had whispered about me were now flooding Sophia's phone with questions she couldn't answer. I learned through the grapevine that Julian had completely vanished. After his confrontation with Sophia's father, he had packed a bag and disappeared, leaving behind his leased car and a mountain of debt. He was a ghost again, likely already scouting for his next victim in a new city, with a new name. The frozen bank account, containing around $30,000 in wedding gifts, remained untouched. It became a monument to his failed heist, inaccessible and useless to everyone. Sophia, meanwhile, had begun the humiliating process of annulling her marriage. Her parents, eternally grateful to me for saving their retirement fund, reached out once. Her father called, his voice heavy with regret. "Rebecca," he said, "what my daughter did to you was inexcusable. We are so sorry, and we are deeply indebted to you." I accepted his apology, but I knew that the chasm between Sophia and me was too wide to be bridged by her parents' gratitude. About a month after the wedding, I received a package by courier. It was a small, heavy box. Inside, nestled in velvet, was the exquisite pearl necklace that Sophia had given me as my Maid of Honor gift. Tucked underneath it was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery. It was from Sophia. It was a long letter, filled with the "I'm sorries" that should have been said weeks ago. She wrote about our 2 decades of friendship, about how she had let her insecurities and Julian's poison twist her mind. She admitted she had been a fool, blinded by the fairy tale he was selling. She took full responsibility for her actions at the wedding, for the horrible things she said, for the pain she had caused. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she wrote at the end. "But I hope one day you'll remember the friend I was, not the monster I became. I destroyed the best thing in my life for a man who was a lie. I will regret it forever. I'm closing the account on that part of my life. I hope you can too." I read the letter and felt not anger, not satisfaction, but a profound and quiet sadness. A sadness for the little girls with the glitter pens, for the teenagers who shared secrets, for the young women who thought they would be in each other's lives forever. The friendship was well and true. Lie over. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together. The trust was gone, and without it, there was nothing left. I put the necklace and the letter away in a box, tucking it into the back of my closet. It was a chapter of my life that was now officially closed. Life moved on. I dove back into my work at the firm, my focus sharper than ever. My friendship with Chloe deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect and loyalty. My quiet apartment was once again a sanctuary, a place of peace. The storm had passed. One evening, about 6 months later, I was having dinner with Chloe at our favorite restaurant. My phone buzzed with a news alert from a financial crimes publication I subscribed to. The headline caught my eye: "Serial fraudster Julian Croft arrested in connection with investment scam." I clicked the link. The article detailed how a man, using several aliases, had been arrested for defrauding over a dozen families across 3 states. There was a recent mugshot. It was him, but the charm was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed, desperate look. The article mentioned that he was also a person of interest in several other cases, including one involving a fraudulent bank account set up in New York. They had finally caught him. A small, grim smile touched my lips. The world had a way of balancing its own ledgers, after all. I showed the article to Chloe. She read it and raised her wine glass. "To closing the account," she said. I clinked my glass against hers. "To closing the account," I repeated. The words tasted like freedom. I had not only survived the betrayal, but I had also ensured that the person responsible faced real-world consequences. My revenge wasn't loud or explosive in the end. It was quiet, precise, and executed on a spreadsheet of facts. I had simply held up a mirror, and the reflection had shattered them. And in the quiet aftermath, I found I had not lost a sister. I had simply closed the account on a bad investment and walked away with my own self-worth intact. That was a profit no one could ever take away from me.